My daughter demanded my dead husband's wedding ring for her fiancé. My mother-in-law manipulated her to destroy me. But when she broke into my house screaming, the truth exploded and they never saw coming what happened next. I'm 48 years old. I run my own bakery that I opened about 6 years ago. And I need to tell this story because what happened last year with my daughter, Olivia, and my mother-in-law, Victoria, basically almost completely destroyed my relationship with my only daughter. The truth is, I still can't believe things went as far as they did, but I guess when there's grief, manipulation, and a wedding ring involved, families can explode in ways you never imagined possible. I should start from the beginning. I mean, from when I met Robert. I was 21 years old, working at a coffee shop while studying business administration, and he came in one day asking for a black coffee and a donut. You know, nothing special, but we ended up talking for like 2 hours because he'd forgotten about a meeting or something. His mother, Victoria, never accepted me, from day one, literally from the day Robert took me to meet her. And when I say she didn't accept me, I mean she made it crystal clear that I wasn't good enough for her son. She came from a family with money. You know what I mean? And I was just a working-class girl with parents who barely made ends meet. We got married anyway because Robert was an amazing man who didn't let his mother control his life, and we were together for 22 years before he died 4 years ago from a sudden cardiac arrest at 44 years old, with no warning signs, nothing to prepare us for that. The first years after Robert died were, I don't know how to explain it, like being underwater all the time. Olivia was 21 when it happened, and she was obviously devastated too. But at least she had her life, her career starting, her friends. I was left with the bakery, with our wedding ring that I never took off for a single day since Robert put it on my finger, and with a bunch of memories that sometimes helped and sometimes made me feel worse. Victoria, of course, became unbearable after her son's death, like calling me every week to tell me I should do this or that Robert would have wanted such and such, that I hadn't taken care of him. Well, as if I could have prevented a cardiac arrest. Basically blaming me in super subtle but constant ways. My brother-in-law, William, Robert's older brother, always tried to keep the peace, calling me from time to time to see how I was doing, apologizing for his mother without ever really confronting her. You know how that goes. The thing is that during those 4 years, Olivia and I stayed close. Or so I thought. She visited the bakery often, helped me on weekends when it was busy. We went out to dinner together, talked about her marketing job, her dates, life. It wasn't perfect, but it was good, you know? We were mother and daughter navigating together this horrible pain of losing Robert. Victoria was still a toxic presence in the background, but Olivia and I kind of ignored her most of the time. Limited visits to important holidays, and that was it. Everything changed about 1.5 years ago when Olivia told me that her boyfriend Benjamin, who she'd been dating for 3 years, had finally proposed. She was super excited, showing me the ring, which was beautiful but clearly didn't cost a fortune, because Benjamin comes from a modest family, works as an elementary school teacher, talking a mile a minute about the wedding, about how she wanted it to be in spring, about the colors she'd chosen. I was happy for her. Seriously. I cried tears of joy, because my girl had found someone good, someone who treated her well and obviously loved her. I really liked Benjamin from the moment I met him, like he was the total opposite of those horrible boyfriends Olivia had in college. About 2 weeks after the engagement, Olivia came to the house on a Sunday afternoon. I was making lasagna, I think, or maybe it was chicken. I don't remember exactly, but I do remember she asked to talk about something important. We sat in the living room, and she started with this whole thing about how she was planning the wedding and had been thinking a lot about her father and how he would have loved to be there to walk her down the aisle. Up to that point, everything was fine. I'd been thinking the same thing. It was natural. But then she says, I've been thinking about something that would be very special to me, something that would make me feel like Dad is present at the wedding somehow. And I tell her, of course, honey, whatever you need, we can put a picture of him, or maybe his favorite song, whatever you want. Olivia looked me straight in the eyes and said, I want to use Dad's wedding ring. Specifically, she wanted Benjamin to wear it as his wedding ring. I froze. Literally felt like someone had thrown cold water on me. I said, wait, what? And she repeated, I want Dad's ring for Benjamin. It would be so meaningful, so special. It would be like Dad is giving us his blessing. I tried to stay calm and explain to her, look, Olivia, I understand you want something of your dad at the wedding, but that ring is very important to me. I've worn it every single day for 26 years. Since your father gave it to me, it's the only tangible thing I have left of our marriage. You know what I mean? It's not just a ring, it's my connection to him. She got defensive immediately, like telling me, "But Mom, it's just a ring. Dad doesn't need it anymore. I need it for my wedding." The conversation started to escalate, and I tried to be reasonable. I offered her other options. We can buy a new ring and engrave Dad's name inside. Or we can find something else of your father's that Benjamin can wear, his cufflinks, his watch, whatever. But Olivia didn't want to hear any of it, kept insisting on the ring, saying I was being selfish, that he was her father too, that she had a right to something so important of his. The argument ended with her storming out of the house, yelling at me that I was a horrible and selfish person who only thought about myself. I stood there in the kitchen, crying, looking at my ring, wondering if I really was being unfair. I spent days thinking about it, like not sleeping well, turning it over and over in my head. But every time I thought about taking off the ring and giving it to Olivia, I felt this tightness in my chest that I couldn't ignore. It was my ring, my symbol of love with Robert, and I wasn't ready to let it go. Maybe I never would be. Olivia didn't speak to me for 2 weeks, and when she finally did, it was to tell me she'd been talking to her grandmother Victoria about the situation. My stomach sank when I heard that, because I knew exactly what it meant. Victoria had always been manipulative and toxic, and now she had the perfect opportunity to get between Olivia and me. Turns out Victoria had been filling Olivia's head with all this garbage about how I'd never been worthy of Robert, how the ring should pass to the next generation, how it was selfish of me to hold on to something I didn't need anymore. Basically, she'd turned this into total warfare. Things escalated quickly after that. Olivia called me one night, late, like 11 p.m., and started yelling at me over the phone, saying Victoria was right, that I'd always been selfish, that I never thought about anyone but myself, that I was ruining her wedding. I told her Victoria had no right to get involved in this, that this was between her and me. But Olivia cut me off and said Victoria was her grandmother and had every right to have an opinion about her own son's ring. The conversation ended with me saying something I probably shouldn't have said. I told her that if she was going to let Victoria manipulate her like that, then maybe she should ask Victoria to pay for the wedding too. That was a mistake. I admit it. Because Olivia immediately said, "You know what? Maybe I will. Because clearly you don't want to be part of my life anyway." And I, in a moment of pure anger and frustration, told her, "Well, perfect. If Victoria is going to pay for your wedding and fill in your head with poison, then I'm not going to contribute a single cent." I'd been planning to give Olivia like $15,000 for the wedding. We'd talked about it before the engagement, but in that moment, I was so furious that I withdrew the offer completely. I hung up the phone and felt horrible immediately, but also angry, like how dare Victoria use my daughter against me? How dare Olivia treat me like this over a ring? The following weeks were terrible. I wasn't sleeping well. The bakery was running, but I was there physically without being there mentally. My employees probably noticed, but nobody said anything. I blocked Victoria's number because she started sending me horrible messages, calling me terrible things, saying Robert had married the wrong person, that I'd never been enough for her family. About 3 months went by like that, not talking to Olivia, not knowing anything about the wedding, nothing. William would call me from time to time, asking if I was okay, telling me his mother was out of control, but he didn't know what to do. I told him to stay out of it, that it was complicated enough without more people getting involved. But one day, I think it was in October, Olivia showed up at the bakery just as we were closing. She looked terrible, like she'd been crying, and told me she needed to talk to me urgently. We went to the back room and she started crying before she could say anything. When she could finally speak, she told me that she and Benjamin had found the perfect place for the wedding, a beautiful venue they'd visited and both loved. But the deposit was $8,000, and they had to pay it in 2 weeks or they'd lose the date. Victoria had promised to help financially, but turns out she'd only given her like $2,000 and now was backing out on the rest of the money, saying they should figure it out themselves if they wanted such an expensive wedding. Olivia was desperate. I could see it in her face, and part of me wanted to hug her and tell her everything was going to be okay, but another part was still hurt by everything that had happened. I asked her, "What about Benjamin? His family?" She explained that Benjamin's family was helping what they could, but they didn't have much money, and Benjamin and she had saved, but it wasn't enough. She looked at me with those eyes I'd known so well since she was a little girl and said, "Mom, I need you. I need your help. I know I screwed up and said horrible things, but please." I told her to give me a few days to think about it, that I couldn't make a decision like that in the moment. She nodded and left, and I sat there in the back room, surrounded by bags of flour and cans of sugar, thinking about what the hell I was going to do. The truth is, I wanted to help her. She's my daughter. I love her more than anything in the world, but I also knew that if I just gave her the money without setting boundaries with Victoria, this was going to keep happening over and over. Again. After thinking about it a lot, I called Olivia 3 days later and told her I was willing to help her with the wedding. Not just with the deposit, but with the full amount I'd originally promised her. But with one non-negotiable condition. She had to cut contact with Victoria completely, or at least until after the wedding, because I wasn't going to continue being part of this toxic dynamic where Victoria used her to hurt me. Olivia was quiet for a long while and then said, "Are you seriously asking me to choose between my grandmother and you?" I explained to her that it wasn't just about me, that Victoria had been toxic her whole life, that she'd always tried to manipulate Robert and now was doing the same thing with her, that this was about protecting herself as much as about our relationship. I told her to think about it carefully, that if Victoria really loved her, she wouldn't have put her in this situation to begin with, wouldn't have lied to her about the money, wouldn't have tried to destroy the relationship with her mother. Olivia started crying again and said she was so sorry for everything she'd said, that she'd been horrible to me, that Victoria had been telling her a bunch of lies about me, and she'd believed them because she was angry. I apologized, too, for withdrawing the financial support that way, told her I'd acted out of anger and regretted it, but that the conditions still stood. I needed to know that Victoria wasn't going to keep interfering in our lives. Olivia finally agreed, told me she'd cut contact with Victoria, that she'd block her number, that she wouldn't see her until things calmed down. I transferred her the money the next day, and they were able to secure the venue. Things improved between Olivia and me over the following weeks. We started talking regularly again. She included me in the wedding plans. We went to taste cakes together. Obviously, I had strong opinions about that being a baker. We looked at dresses. It was almost like before, but there was still this underlying tension, like we were both walking carefully around certain topics. Everything exploded again about 2 months later, when William called me super uncomfortable saying Victoria was trying to contact me through him. Apparently, she'd realized Olivia had blocked her and was furious, calling William at all hours, demanding he give me messages from her. I told William to please not get involved, that this situation was complicated enough. But he told me his mother was threatening to show up at my house or at the bakery if I didn't talk to her. I sighed, super tired of all this, and decided to unblock Victoria just to have a final conversation with her and make it clear she should stay away. I called her that same afternoon, and it was probably the worst phone conversation of my life. Victoria started yelling at me immediately, telling me I'd taken her granddaughter away from her, that I was a manipulative and horrible person, that I'd poisoned Olivia against her. I told her very clearly that nobody had taken anything from anyone, that Olivia had made her own decision after realizing how Victoria had been using her. She screamed louder, saying I'd never been worthy of her son, that Robert had regretted marrying me, which was a total and horrible lie, that the ring should be Olivia's by right. I screamed back at her for the first time in my life, like I completely lost my composure, and told her everything I'd been holding in for 26 years. How she'd done everything possible to ruin my marriage, how she'd treated Robert like he was her property, how she'd never accepted that he was happy with me, how now she was trying to do the same thing with Olivia. I told her to stay away from my family, from my daughter, from my life, or I was going to get a restraining order if necessary. I hung up the phone, shaking, with my heart racing like crazy, and realized my bakery employee was looking at me worried from the doorway. I thought that would be the end of it, that Victoria would give up and leave us alone, but clearly I underestimated her level of toxicity. About 6 months before the wedding, in April or so, we were having a family dinner at my house, just Olivia, Benjamin, me, and a couple of close friends, when someone knocked on the door super aggressively. Olivia went to open it, and Victoria literally pushed the door open and came in screaming, demanding to know why she hadn't been invited, saying she had every right to be there because she was Olivia's grandmother. Olivia tried to get her out, but Victoria pushed her aside, came into the living room where we were all having dinner and started a total dramatic show, crying and screaming about how we'd destroyed her family, how I'd taken her son and now her granddaughter, how we were horrible people. Benjamin stood up trying to calm the situation, but Victoria completely ignored him, kept screaming, throwing things. It was absolute madness. I called William immediately and told him to come get his mother out of my house or I'd call the police. William arrived in like 15 minutes, which were the longest 15 minutes of my life, with Victoria screaming nonstop, my friends super uncomfortable, not knowing what to do, Olivia crying in a corner, Benjamin trying to comfort her. When William arrived, he basically had to physically carry Victoria out of the house while she kept screaming that I was going to regret this, that I was going to ruin Olivia's wedding, that she was going to make everyone know what kind of person I really was. After they left, Olivia was in pieces, shaking, crying uncontrollably. I hugged her and she told me between sobs, "Mom, I'm so sorry. I had no idea Grandma was like this. I'd never seen her this way." I told her it wasn't her fault, that Victoria had hidden her true nature for a long time, that I'd seen her like this with Robert but never so extreme. Olivia looked at me and said, "I understand now why Dad kept his distance from her. I understand why you wanted me to stay away." That night we had a long and honest conversation, the first really honest one in months. Olivia apologized to me for everything, for having asked me for the ring that way, for having let Victoria manipulate her, for having said horrible things to me. I also apologized for withdrawing the financial support so abruptly, for not having been clearer from the beginning about how toxic Victoria was. I explained that it wasn't that I didn't want to share things about her father with her, but that ring specifically was my daily connection to Robert, that I needed it to still feel close to him. Olivia told me she completely understood now, that she'd been so focused on her wedding and what she wanted, that she hadn't thought about what the ring meant to me. She asked me if we could start over, forget everything that had happened and focus on her wedding and our relationship. I told her, of course, that I loved her more than anything, and that none of this had changed that. The next few months until the wedding were beautiful. Honestly, Olivia and I became closer than ever, planning every detail together. Benjamin basically became my son-in-law before the official wedding because he spent so much time with us. Victoria tried to contact us several more times, through William, through unknown numbers. She even showed up once at the bakery, but I told her to leave or I'd call the police and she left. William apologized constantly for his mother. Said he was considering limiting contact with her too because she was out of control. About a month before the wedding, Olivia and I were having coffee at my house. When she brought up the ring again, my body tensed immediately. But she quickly said, "Wait, let me finish." She told me she'd been thinking about the tradition of wearing something borrowed at the wedding. You know, that thing about something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. She asked me if I'd be willing to lend her my ring just for the ceremony. That she'd wear it on a chain around her neck, under the dress, close to her heart, and would return it to me immediately after. The difference this time was total. You know what I mean? She wasn't demanding. She wasn't manipulating. She was just honestly asking if I'd be comfortable with that. I told her I'd think about it, and I really did for several days. In the end, I decided yes, that I could do that. That lending the ring for a few hours so she could feel her father's presence was very different from giving it away permanently. I told her yes, and she cried, hugged me, thanked me like 1,000 times. The wedding was in May. A beautiful spring day with perfect weather. That morning, before Olivia put on her dress, the two of us were alone in the bridal room, and I gave her my ring. I put it on the silver chain she'd bought specifically for this and placed it around her neck. We both hugged each other, crying, like the good kind of crying, and she told me, "Mom, thank you for everything. Thank you for being patient with me. Thank you for loving me even when I was horrible to you." I told her I'd always love her, no matter what. That's what mothers do. The ceremony was perfect. Benjamin was crying when Olivia walked down the aisle with me. Her father wasn't there, but I was. And that meant something. The vows were beautiful. The reception was an amazing party. Victoria obviously wasn't invited, and according to William, didn't even ask about it. Apparently, she'd finally accepted that she'd lost this battle. At the end of the night, Olivia returned the ring to me, put it in my hand and told me, "This is yours, Mom. Thank you for sharing Dad with me today." It's been about 6 months since the wedding and things are good. Like really good. Olivia and Benjamin come to dinner every week. They include me in their plans. We talk almost every day. Victoria hasn't tried to contact us in months, William says she. finally started therapy after he threatened to cut contact with her too. I don't know if that'll work, but at least it's something. My relationship with Olivia is stronger than ever. I think this horrible conflict ended up teaching us both important things about boundaries, about communication, about not letting toxic people control our lives. I still wear my ring every day. Still think about Robert when I look at it. Still miss him like crazy after 4 years. But now I also think about Olivia's wedding day, about how I shared that little piece of him with her in a way that felt right for both of us. I don't know if I'll ever be ready to completely let go of the ring. Maybe I never will be, and that's okay. Olivia understands that now, and that's what matters.